Industrial organizational psychologist.
I didn't know that was a job. Industrial organizational psychologist.
That's the first I've ever heard of it.
I'd say it's becoming far more necessary for the technological advances that we're seeing.
Industrial organizational psychologists apply psychological principles and research methods to better understand the organization. In particular, they look at what are the factors and methods which help to promote the effectiveness of organizations.
Deciphering, or I guess getting into the heads of industrial organizationalists.
An industrial psychologist
Analyzes an industry and how
Save more money and hire more people, which is incredibly important, especially in the economy.
We begin by looking at the job in question and identifying those skills and characteristics which are important for success in the job. Then we pick the best assessment solution and process to be able to measure those critical success factors and identify candidates who are most likely to succeed on the job.
it's organizing a workflow maybe in an industry, and how that impacts the people that work on that workflow.
how it flows, the culture behind the organization, how people interact with each other, the values of the organization, how that comes through the entity.
Hi everybody, my name is Atia Lowgali, and I'm going to be hosting this conversation, which is about very interesting topic with very distinguished guest. The topic of our conversation is known as Industrial Organizational Psychology, or IO psychology. It's also known as occupational psychology or business psychology. Whatever the term is, it deals with human behavior at the workplace. And the purpose of this conversation is to raise awareness and understanding among our students of this very interesting field. It's our privilege to have with us here a distinguished guest, Dr. John Neetin. Dr. John Neetin enjoys a very rich background of experiences ranging from manufacturing to management, and from IT to education and academia. He has held many positions, senior management position, in many different companies in many different countries. And it's my privilege to have him here with us. Please allow me to welcome him in your name. Dr. Neetin, it gives me a great pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed.
This conversation.
Thank you.
That we hope to give our students an idea about this very interesting topic that brings together three entities, that is industry, psychology, and business or organization. Even though the term is relatively new, my understanding and from our conversation yesterday, that the interest in many aspects of the workplace dates back to very ancient history and civilization, that the Chinese, the Egyptian, and the Greek, they have all in some way or another dealt with this.
Sure.
Could you kindly elaborate on that?
Yes, well, if we go back to ancient times, the pyramids in Egypt, for instance, would never have got built without some solid understanding of how to motivate and how to organize people to achieve major projects, such as building the pyramids.
Yes.
Also, I find fascinating that the earliest literature that I have come across relating to organization behavior is actually to be found in the Bible, where the story is being told of Moses' exodus from Egypt with the children of Israel, And it seems, reading it in the Bible, that it wasn't such a fast exodus as I imagined as a child. It actually took years for them to accomplish this move. And one of the inhibiting factors was that Moses apparently was the inspirational leader of the group.
Definitely.
And he had an absolutely open door policy as far as solving individual problems. And each new day would start, people would come to him with their individual and family problems. He would solve them. The day would have gone, the next day would start, same problem. Until one day his son-in-law came to him and he said, "Father, there's got to be a better way. Why don't we organize ourselves into tribes with tribal leaders? Families will report into the tribal leader leaders will report into you. You have far less problem solving to do, and we can do far more walking." And that is indeed what happened. So the earliest example of an organization chart, although not shown as we are familiar with seeing it, the description of it is there in the Bible.
Very interesting indeed. How can we define IO psychology? What is the proper definition, or what's your definition of it?
Well, you know, the word psychology is already frightening.
Yes.
And a lot of people are put off, I think, by that word. But whether we call it psychology or behavior, it comes down to the same thing. It's fundamentally getting a group of people to harmoniously work together against a common objective, and to achieve that objective as expediently and as efficiently as possible.
Is there a difference between industrial psychology and organizational psychology, or do they refer to the same subject matter?
It all refers to the same thing. It doesn't matter whether it is industrial in nature. It doesn't matter whether it is recreational in matter, football team, for instance. It doesn't matter whether it is governmental in nature. It is fundamentally the same topic being applied in different environmental conditions.
So is it fair to say that what we're trying to do, or apply the science and methods of psychology into the workplace, wherever it is, or into an organization, wherever it is, or whatever its goals?
Yes. What we are looking for is to try to understand patterns of behavior under certain conditions. Now, I always find it fascinating in a classroom. I may break up the class into groups of 4 or 5 students to work on a task. Now, as soon as I do that, each of those groups of 4 or 5 students adopt specific patterns of behavior that are peculiar to them. They, if you like, almost immediately start to create their own culture.
Fascinating.
And the culture that they create, based on individual experience and the interaction of individual personalities, dictates how well or how poorly that particular group performs.
So, shall we say that the source or the reason for their success or failure is that adaptation of the values or culture among the group?
It can be a wide variety of things. You know, one of the situations that I often present students with, I say, listen, I'm a very wealthy man and I have got the most unbelievable business idea. And what I'm going to do is to fund each of you to exploit this idea. You can have as much money as you want to do it. You can have access to my knowledge as much as you want. Now, at the end of your first trading year, will you all have equal success? And of course, the answer is no. The answer is no, because each group has its own peculiar interaction, behaviors between the members of the group. And those behaviors are predicated upon the past experience of each member, the past educational record of each member, the personality of each member, whether they are outward going and want to contribute, or whether they are corner analytic and want to solve problems. Each group is going to have a totally different composition. And when they are challenged to work on a common project, competing against other groups, there are going to be winners, there are going to be losers. So what we're trying to do is to understand quite what is it that makes the winner.
That's a very important a question or concern.
Sure.
Let me move to the area of motivation.
Yes.
It's one of the main challenges in any organization.
Yes.
Is how to motivate people to achieve certain goal.
Yes.
To bring the best in them.
Yes.
Is motivation possible? And if so, how? And how can IO psychology contribute to that?
Motivation is, right at the beginning, highly dependent upon cultural background. I have, for instance, lectured a lot in Russia. And in Russia, the idea that a manager should sit down at a round table and say to all of his colleagues, come on then guys, what ideas have you got to make this work, is almost laughable. Because the Russian culture doesn't work like that. The manager will sit down with his group of people and he will dictate what he wants them to achieve, when he wants them to achieve it by. And if you like, woe betide them if they don't. You have had opposite experience. I understand you have lived for some time in San Diego in California.
Yeah.
And there, sitting down around a table as equals and having situational leaders emerge, if you like, is common practice. It fits in with the culture.
Does that have relates to the power distance in that society determines, or
power distance has got a
distance.
lot to do with it? Yes, you know, some societies.
or is it part of a product of an educational system that does not
No.
encourage?
No.
No.
No. I think one of the confusions in management education is to do with the educational system. Most management theory has evolved out of the United States and is descriptive of the culture that is predominant in that particular nation. There has then been an attempt to universally spread the same ideas and practices throughout the world. And of course it doesn't work.
isn't there any success like in places like in South Korea, for example, where it's a different culture, or maybe in Malaysia or Singapore?
They all have, each of those has culturally, you mentioned the word power distance, different variations of power distance. North America prides itself on having fairly low power distance.
Indeed.
If you move into Asian countries, they traditionally have higher power distance. And it is extremely difficult to apply the same set of rules and regulations in a high power distance environment as you would in a low one.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, that will take us to another issue, and that of leadership.
Yes.
Most organizations complain of having a very difficult time in creating leaders within the organization.
Yes.
And how would IO psychology contribute to that, or deal
I
with
think
the
now
issue
here,
of leadership?
I have to declare an interest that anything I would say is my personal opinion. I have major variances with what accepted theory may say in this area. When it comes down to leadership, we all seem to be looking for the Messiah person.
Especially in the Middle East.
Well,
We get long history of that.
yeah, I know. That's taking it literally. But, all organizations are looking for the great man or the great woman who's going to take them out of trouble. I find that very derogatory to the rest of the workforce. Basically it says we have a bunch of people who are the general workforce, who are sitting there without an idea in their minds, waiting for this Messiah to come along, like Moses, and lead them out of the trouble they're in. Not at all. I believe that leadership is absolutely situational. We all have our own particular strengths and capabilities. And under circumstances that are appropriate to us, we can exercise the leadership role. It's if we the analogy often given here is a sinking boat. In a sinking boat, there are people who are still going to be arranging the deck chairs on the deck of the boat. The band is still going to be playing, perhaps. But there will be people who, recognizing the situation, will be proactively taking control.
Taking charge. Control.
Yes, absolutely. And we have to create a culture within all organizations where that taking control by the capable, inspired individual is possible.
So I think every crisis will produce its own heroes or its own leaders.
I think so.
You think so?
What I have great difficulty with, the renowned Dutch sociologist Fons Trompenaars has a model that he names the 7 dimensions of culture. The first one of which is universalism versus particularism. We are forever trying to adopt a universalist approach, We are trying to have the overall solution to every man's problems, wherever they may be. Whereas, conversely, every man actually has the solution, by and large, to his own problems.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be able to strike a balance between universalism and particularism.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders, to me, always strike me as being universalist people. I know that as an industrial leader myself, I was certainly universalist. I was firmly of the opinion that my strategies, my ideas, and so forth were what should be adopted
Mm-hmm.
by everybody, because I had been successful and I believed that wherever I was, I could perpetuate that success. I could have done far, far better working the other way around.
Meaning?
Meaning, delegating my responsibilities, letting other leaders emerge in areas of their expertise.
Mm-hmm. But it's something that's very rarely practiced. We don't see a lot of
It's
that.
talked about a lot.
Yeah, talked about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, you know, if we go right back again to the beginnings of organization studies,
Mm-hmm.
The Romans were extremely successful in building their Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
They did it on a militaristic basis, and the militaristic terms were very strict. The way in which they were organized was highly regimented. And we have carried that sort of mentality all the way through, well into the 20th century. And it's only when we got into the middle of the 20th century, once we were well past the Second World War, and the lingering elements of militarism that came with the war were dispersed, that we recognize that the ordinary soldier has got a lot to contribute. He's not there as cannon fodder.
Yeah, things have changed a lot.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And if we look at the modern army, the modern army is small groups of highly specialized people, each of which has got a specialism, and under certain circumstances will take the leadership role.
Yes, indeed. And that will take us to another a question about the influence of culture at large.
Yes.
At the workplace. And if that influence will hinder knowledge transfer from one society to another.
Yes. It's the simple answer. We all carry around with us a variety of cultures. We have the culture, perhaps primarily from the country where we were born and we grew up.
Okay.
We have the culture that is associated with the education specialism that we went through. Doctors have a different culture to lawyers and so forth. We have a culture that is associated with our friends and associates. Do we support a football team? Yes, we do. Each football team has quite different culture. So we are carrying around with us a whole range of cultures that make us what we are as an individual. And because we are what we are, human beings, we always think that our culture is a little bit superior to everybody else's.
Otherwise, we won't be human.
Exactly, exactly. And, you know, we tend to look down on other people's cultures.
We're the best.
Yes. And therefore, we look down on their ideas, maybe, and the way in which they're expressing their ideas. And that does not contribute to a learning environment.
Mhm.
It inhibits.
Unfortunately. Even at the age of satellite and internet and the diminishing of boundaries among nations, nobody can be isolated anymore. How can you protect your own culture in this international open arena?
No, you can't. I specialized for a number of years in the area of strategic alliances, where you are attempting to bring together two organizations with complementary skills and common objectives. And makes a lot of sense if they form a strategic alliance and one specializes in one element, the other specializes in another element, and they bring it together to conquer a marketplace. Any
examples?
Oh, there are a lot in the automobile industry.
Mm-hmm.
The automobile industry now has evolved to a level of interdependence where you might think you're driving a Jaguar,
Mm-hmm.
but actually it's got a Ford engine in it.
Fascinating.
And so forth.
It's an excellent example.
At that level, at the technology level, it works. When you try to then amalgamate
Mm-hmm.
at a brand name level, you run into all sorts of problems. There was the famous case in the automobile industry a few years ago where Daimler-Benz of Germany and Chrysler Corporation of America agreed on a strategic alliance,
Mm-hmm.
which very rapidly transpired not to be a strategic alliance, but to be an acquisition, which rapidly transpired to be a German-dominated alliance, which rapidly fell apart.
Very, very interesting.
Interestingly, a few years later, Chrysler entered into a strategic alliance with Fiat of Italy. And that has worked far more compatibly, maybe because of earlier lessons learnt from the previous disaster.
Okay. That takes us to globalization.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we understand how important culture is, its
Yes.
impact on the workforce. But we are forced right now, in one way or another, to deal at the workplace with people from different education, cultural background, different languages, and that brings many challenges and also many opportunities.
Yes.
How can we deal with that? What's the best way to deal with a situation when you have people from different cultures in the workplace?
If I had the answer to that, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
Where would you be?
Probably Secretary General of the United Nations.
So
it's a very real problem. And once again, it comes back to the feelings of relative cultural superiority. We haven't evolved enough as human beings to maximize on the opportunities that the world presents us with.
Yes, indeed.
And, that is the problem. We were talking about strategic alliances just now, and there is a 3-stage progression that all of us as human beings go through. The first is dependence. And as children, we are highly dependent on our parents.
Yes.
Organizations are the same. Young organizations, highly dependent on a whole variety of things. We then move into being teenagers, if you like, when independence is what
rebellion.
rebellions. We think we know it all.
Of course.
Yes. And then we realize we're not doing quite as well as we thought we should be. And we recognize the value of input from other people. And that leads us into interdependence. Now, interdependence is an ideal. It's not a reality. If we look at the almost lowest level of interdependence, we come to the family unit.
Okay.
Husband and wife, deeply in love, decide to marry, to spend the rest of their days together. Do they do so? Often as not, no. In many societies,
it's becoming more difficult than
it
used to be.
Yes, yes, because interests as intelligent human beings, it's very difficult to keep interests aligned all of the time. And unless you can keep interests aligned all of the time, interdependence falls by the wayside.
Yeah.
So what we see happening in families also happens in organizations.
Fascinating. One final question. When we say organizational psychology, it comes to the layperson an idea that do organizations have psychology? Do they have psychological problems? Do they go through psychological problems like we do?
We all have psychological problems. When we go to the workplace, we don't leave them at home.
Especially the bosses.
Well, no, all of us.
All of us.
What problems we have, we carry with us. It's part of our baggage. So emotional problems, psychological problems, what have you, we still have them when we're in the workplace. And they dictate the way in which we react within that environment.
Yeah, that's indeed. Well, I would like to thank you very much for giving us this time and this beautiful and useful ideas. I hope that we have succeeded in giving a glimpse of the IO psychology, and thank you for watching us.
Good.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.